Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America. Thank you for joining us on the program. Website, very simple, thisweekinamerica.us. As mentioned, our guest on the program today is Kerry Susan Drake. She's a prolific award-winning author, poetry, plays, short stories, and novels. Her background includes journalism, public relations, teaching, theater, broadcasting, portrait artistry. A fifth-generation Australian, and from her native country, she joins us on This Week in America via Skype. Kerry Susan Drake, welcome to This Week in America. It's great to have you with us on the program.
Thank you for having me, Rick. I really appreciate this time.
It is our pleasure to have you with us, and so much to talk about with all of the books that you've written across a number of different categories, and we will do that during the course of the program. I want to go back to your early years and the influence that an aunt had on you that really introduced you to the art of literature, of writing, of reading. Talk about her, because she really influenced you for the rest of your life with that love of writing.
Correct. My English aunt came from London at the period of the Second World War, and fell in love with my uncle, Roy, and they married and settled in Melbourne. And my mother and father had three little girls, and I was the middle girl. My father died when I was 7 years of age. He had a car accident. And during the time of my mother's sort of healing period of that, my English aunt took me under her wing, and I stayed with her family a lot. And basically during that time, I was introduced to a lot of art and a lot of poetry, not necessarily authors or anything, but there was a lot of opportunity to talk as a child. I got a lot of one-on-one. We used to sit around in the lounge room, or the family room as they call it, and just talk after dinner. We never watched TV. And this was quite a contrast from my home. Not that we had a lot of TV. We had probably a very expensive TV, because my father was a very successful sportsman and got lots of trophies and played professional football and played for the famous Collingwood football team. And so he was somewhat an entertainer at home, whereas at my aunt's home, we just sat around after dinner and talked a lot. And this was a great period that stayed with me in my life, especially the one-on-one that I received from my aunt. And when I turned 45, I'm 60 years of age now, but when I was 45, I had a birthday party, and my English aunt gave me as a gift the English Woman's Diary for Poetry. And I just loved that book, and I realized that her influence was so profound. Not only do I sound English, even though I was born in Australia, I just have that natural tendency to hover towards poetry, and studied poetry, studied journalism first, but then studied poetry and began to seriously write poetry.
Well, in fact, you've got an award-winning book. In 2012, the book you wrote won an award, USA Best Books for Inspirational Poetry, Send Me an Angel. I think on the YouTube channel, you'll be able to see the book cover, and we are on YouTube. If you go to our website, is very simple, thisweekinamerica.us, and you will see the icon there for YouTube, and you can see the interview. We've got a copy of the book. Kerry Susan Drake is our guest on the program. Talk about that book. It's an award-winning book. It's something that obviously you are quite proud of. Talk about the book, what went into that, and the kind of feedback you're getting, because it's been critically acclaimed by everyone. Had to be an exciting time for you when you wrote that book, and it did so well.
Yes, it was. I put a lot of work into this book, and it really is quite a big collection of my earliest poetry and my award-winning poetry. Plus, I included a short story that I wrote based upon a true experience of meeting a young man, a man who changed his life for the better after coming in contact with myself and my sister, who are Christians. And he basically began to think differently and find himself and fulfill his life in finding a new life after an addiction to alcohol.
And the book we're talking about, yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Send Me an Angel.
Yes, Send Me an Angel, and that book, 2012 award-winning book that's available, as are all the books by Kerry Susan Drake. Those are available at Amazon.com. You can link on directly at our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and go there. And you'll find Kerry Susan Drake at Facebook. It's very simple, facebook.com/Kerry Susan Drake. Talking about that award-winning book, Send Me an Angel, and you talked about that's been inspirational for many people in the fact that you're a spiritual person, and you talk often about that. Talk about that and the influence that has on you as a writer.
Okay, well, look, ever since I was a child, I basically had a leaning towards religion, possibly because my father died at when I was young. It kind of made me think deeper, but the pivotal thing that really turned me towards Christianity was when I was 18. I loved riding horses, and I fell off a horse, and I had a miraculous recovery. And from that point on, I changed my direction from being involved in medical research. I was working at the Walter and Eliza Hall Institute of Medical Research, and I left because I believed in preventative medicine and began to pursue the arts and study the arts. And I basically trained as an actress with the Crawford School of Film and Television, and I studied journalism. So spirituality for me also became a big thing because I became a Mormon at the age of 19. And that was only after really pondering what the purpose of life was. And two missionary sisters came into my life. And from that time on, I had found the religion that I would follow for the rest of my life.
And make some trips to the United States, I understand, too, coming to Salt Lake City on a fairly regular basis.
Yes, I made my first trip to Salt Lake in 2007, and that was a wonderful journey. And it was principally to see the church in action, to listen to the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, to see the Welfare Center and the Humanitarian Center, to see the church offices and the Salt Lake Temple, to go through the Salt Lake Temple. So it was, a sort of point in my life where I had to identify with the church after being a member for so many years. So I've been back 4 times, and always go back to see friends and just be there for the atmosphere and the beautiful city that it is.
Yes, Salt Lake City is a beautiful city, a beautiful section of the country. You're listening to This Week in America. Our website is thisweekinamerica.us. Our guest on the program is award-winning author Kerry Susan Drake. Kerry is Kerry Susan Drake. Her books are available, and a number of books there are, at Amazon.com. Information at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. And you can find Kerry on Facebook at facebook.com/Kerry Susan Drake. So many books to talk about, and I'd like to talk about Journey to New York. It's an interesting story, and then we'll talk about some of the books that you've got coming out here fairly soon. Let's talk about Journey to New York. You wrote this a few years ago. I think it was 2009. talk about the premise of the book, because it's very poignant.
Yes, well, as you know, September 11 happened in 2001, and I had you could say, the misfortune. My children were in Canada going to school, and I was woken up by a phone call from my daughter telling me that she'd been sent home from school because of what had happened in New York. And I was very, very upset. I turned on my television, and there I saw the planes going into the World Trade Center, and it was just devastating. I was so concerned for my daughter, and also my son, my young son, who would have been around 13, 14 at the time. So eventually these incidents came to my mind to write a story to help my son, my 14-year-old son, to come to terms with such an event in history, because I felt that the impact of this incident was like war, and young people would have been really affected by it, just as we as adults were really terrified by the actions of those people who committed that crime against humanity. And it inspired me to write Journey to New York, based on and her son, her 12-year-old son, who were affected by September 11. Their father was in New York on business, and he was caught up in the terrible incident. And I wrote the story to inspire and also to help my son. The story unfolds basically of the mother and son's relationship as they travel to New York to identify his body. And I felt very touched and very moved to write that story, and I hope that it brought home empathy, not only for us who saw it, but those who were families directly affected by it, as I do know that there were around about 5 or 8 families in Melbourne or Australia that were affected by the tragedy.
And the book is called Journey to New York. That's still available among the collection of Kerry Susan Drake books that you will find at Amazon.com. And you've got several books that'll be coming out soon. One is called All Things Are Possible. Tell me a little bit about that and when that's going to be out and where we can get information on that.
Right. Well, All Things Are Possible is basically a collection of songs that I've written, and they're the lyrics which will be in the book, which will also include journalistic articles that I've researched and written. And basically, All Things Are Possible is based on a scripture from the Bible. With God, all things are possible. And I know that that's true. And I basically, in my writing of the songs, which I'm working with a young composer in Melbourne, Sally Smybert, to share inspirational words and music, and hopefully it'll be out maybe around October. Could be earlier than that, just in the process.
Yeah, and you can check Amazon from time to time. The name of the book is All Things Are Possible. The author is Kerry Susan Drake. And, of course, check her out. She'll be keeping everybody updated at Facebook, facebook.com, Kerry Susan Drake. And if we get information on that, we will pass that along as well. And another book you're working on, Women and the World? Tell me about that.
Yes, well, Women in the World is a collection of poetry that I wrote especially for women. And I actually put this book together back in around 2002. It was a montage of collection of poetry that I wrote over the years, and we were allowed to publish this book for our graduation from professional writing and editing and the study of poetry. And basically from the first book, which is at the State Library in Victoria and the National Library in Canberra, it was titled Women and the Word, because I felt that there was a few religious poems in it, but apart from poetry that was inspirational and just you know, a montage of thoughts and ideas about women. And then recently I felt that I should put the book together again and call it Women and the World, and put with it artwork that I've done over the years of portraits, not only of women in my family, but just my artwork. And this is the first time I've ever shared that with anyone. My artwork to me is quite precious, and I've done a lot of poetry, and I've also done a lot of women's portraits. Not only my mother, myself, my sister, my children, friends, doctors. I've just had a love for doing at least one portrait a year of a family member, and it's just grown to a collection. So the poetry, Women in the World, will be what you call a coffee table book, so that, you know, you can casually pick it up and read and look at some beautiful words and some beautiful artwork.
And that will be available this year as well?
That's correct.
And again, you can follow that information by going to Amazon, to Facebook, Kerry Susan Drake's page, and we'll bring you that information as it becomes available. A minute or so left in the program, and you're listening to This Week in America. Information on our guest available at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. You can also check out the YouTube version by clicking on the YouTube icon at the website, thisweekinamerica.us. Our guest is Kerry Susan Drake. Kerry is Kerry Susan Drake. Her work is available at Amazon.com. Also, you can follow her on Facebook at Facebook.com, Kerry Susan Drake. A couple minutes left in the program. This has been something, writing and the arts in general have been a passion for your life. We talked about the beginning at age 7 with your aunt. Talk about the satisfaction you get from writing. You say writing is basically like an addiction. It's something that you need to do, and you're able to reach so many people in empathy is something that you talk a lot about it in your books. Talk about, in the minute or so we have left, why you write, why it's so important to you to get these messages out.
Yes, really it's more conviction to express myself, and I write about everything. My mentors, or those who have inspired me as writers, have been poets such as Emily Dickinson, who to me was a posthumous poet and did so much for us in terms of writing about subjects that are taboo, like death. I write mainly about life, not death, but I appreciated Emily Dickinson's absolute beauty in writing, and that motivated me to be a writer and to be a good writer. Also, Australian poets like Judith Wright and Australian authors like Colleen McCulloch, who died earlier this year. Such writers have been part of my reading, my education. They're writers and poets that I love to perform their work. I appreciate writing. I appreciate life. I'm basically a person who senses the moment and writes in the moment. Recently, I started writing a new play called Why Did You Want to Marry Me? And I could see immediately the humor in such a statement. And the flow of words came quite easily because I could draw on my own experience. And so I think people should write. I think it's not just an isolated career for me. It's something everyone can do. Everyone can write a journal. I started writing a journal when I was 18 and 19 and did a lot of research on my family history, and I just loved the adventure. It kept me busy, it kept me out of trouble. It was a focus, it was a career, so I've enjoyed the journey.
Well, and your talents have touched a number of people, and unfortunately, we are out of time on the program. But again, all the information on our guest on the program, Kerry Susan Drake, available. A link onto our website, thisweekinamerica.us. You'll find all the information there. Kerry Susan Drake is the author you would look up at Amazon.com. Her works are there. Later this year, the two newest ones will be available. And, of course, you can follow Kerry at Facebook, facebook.com/Kerry Susan Drake, and Kerry is spelled Kerry. Kerry Susan, it's been a pleasure having you on the program. Continued good luck. Congratulations on the career you've had to this point, and, like I say, touching so many people with your craft. Thank you so much for sharing this time with us. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, too. Have a wonderful day.
You as well. Thank you. Once again, Kerry Susan Drake, our guest on This Week in America. Information on Kerry and all of our guests available at our website, thisweekinamerica.us.